It sounds really cool. Wow, you own properties all across the country? Yeah, I own a property in Las Vegas, and I own some in North Carolina, and I own one in Miami. And wow, that's awesome. And then people starting out, they want to try and do that, but it's stupid, honestly. Especially if you're doing one, don't do that. If anyone's listening to this, because every time you're literally starting out fresh.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Multifamily Strategy Podcast. I'm Christian, your host, joined today by Anthony Redmond. Anthony, thanks for joining, man.
I appreciate you having me, Christian.
Dude, it's good to see you here. This is another guy who does the Section 8 strategy. And you may have, at some point, heard me rip on people who buy Section 8 houses in the Midwest. Well, this is someone who's actually done it, and I think you've done a really good job. So I'm excited to have a conversation with a skilled operator who knows what they're doing, who's found a niche and is serving their community for people who need housing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've been doing this for a while, so I'm assuming you're also making money doing it. So you're doing a good thing and you're making money doing the thing. So really excited to have you on the channel. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having on. I think it's going to be a great conversation.
I think so. Before we dive all the way in, I'm always curious, what is your starting point before all the real estate? What is your original background and why real estate?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, and I get asked it a lot. And, ultimately, just kind of a brief, 30,000 foot view of me. I'm originally from New York. It's kind of my thing. I wear a New York Mets hat. We're going the distance this year if you follow baseball. Hopefully, at least. It's a long time coming. But moved to Florida, the Tampa area when I was younger with my parents. Kind of grew up there, and in a small town there. And overall, you're growing up in a small town, and you're not in a big city like maybe New York or LA or even Miami, and some of these cities where people are just hustling and bustling. And it's easy to kind of get stuck in a mentality of, this is what you do. You go to school, you get a college degree, you work for, XYZ company, or hopefully, maybe a good company like Fortune 500 company, and you work, and then, you retire, and hopefully you can have some money and be young enough to when you retire, your body's still moving to enjoy it. And I kind of got stuck in that realm, in my 20s. I'm in my 30s now, but and I was kind of doing that, and you don't know any different. That's all around you. That's it. So finally, I got a little bit out of the mindset, and I went through different companies. I worked for a couple Fortune 500 companies, and I think in the area where I'm from, a lot of people work for Public Supermarket. It's a great company. They're starting to grow, up the southeast and whatnot, and great company. You can become a manager. There's people that retire millionaires because of their stock. And actually, myself, I kind of saw a bit of inner workings. A girl I was dating at the time, her dad was a district manager, and so I saw, even if you get to a district manager level, you might be making six figures, but he literally had no life. He had a half a day on Wednesdays and a full day, half a day on Saturdays and a full day on Sundays. And I'm like, man, this really isn't for me. So I hopped from there over to another company that's nationwide, and Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and kind of worked my way up a little bit there. And same deal, you're working 50, 60 hours a week. And I was always kind of interested in real estate as well. And, but I never wanted to be a real estate agent. I just didn't really see that appealing to me. I guess it wasn't as cool then as it might be now, or I don't necessarily know if it's cool now, but it wasn't a big thing then as it is now to become an agent, and everyone and their mother has a license now. But I was always interested in real estate, but I didn't know there's all these other avenues that you can do within real estate. And finally, I did some banking as well. And, finally I started kind of looking into things, and I'm like, man, what can I do? So, moving forward, I moved down to Miami, Fort Lauderdale first, and then Miami. And I had a sales job for a relocation company down there. And, if you're good at talking to people, really, you can do anything, right? And, that's one of my, biggest skills, is being able to talk to anybody about anything, right? So I was doing really good at a sales job, but again, they were open in different areas, and they're wanting me to head up, and again, I didn't want to do it. But now I stumbled upon real estate and wholesaling real estate, and I'm like, wow, what is this wholesaling thing? you find a property, you sell it to somebody, and you make a check. And I'm like, man. So this is back in 2015, before it became really, really big, and like 17, 18,
Mm-hmm.
19, and now everyone and their mother's doing it. And so I was like, this is my out. I came across it. I'll never forget it on Facebook, and it was for a webinar, and I was like, this is my out. 2015, I tried it and I failed. I spent so much money on the guru that was teaching everybody at the time, and I didn't have any money for marketing, and that kind of crushed me. And so I didn't really do a deal. And it was, what I think it was, like $8,000 or $10,000 for the guru at the time. And I say guru because, as you know, there's a lot of them out there that aren't like you and I, and they're not out in the field. If you go to our socials, you can see us out there running through walls, talking to tenants.
And that's the biggest thing, right? Is working with an operator. Everyone
Right.
and their sister wants to be an influencer. Everyone wants to sell you something.
Hmm.
You followed the rules, which the first rule, if you want to teach, is be someone who can also do. And there's not a
Yeah,
whole lot of them. So you're actually in the
exactly.
field. You're the actual operator. You've done something worth replicating,
Yep,
and
exactly.
now you teach it.
And yeah, exactly. And you're able to teach it, and you're able to teach it really well because you do it, right? You've been there, you've done it, and you still currently do it versus not. And there's a lot of those out there that don't, and they sell you on the flashy stuff. So, 2017 came, and I was living in downtown Miami, and I was like, listen, this real estate thing's really got to work. I kind of hit rock bottom in a lot of different areas, my life, and I was like, this is it. Like, this real estate thing's got to work. And at the time too, it was funny. I had three choices. It was doing this real estate wholesaling thing. Back then, it wasn't called. It was drop shipping. It wasn't Amazon. Amazon wasn't a big drop shipping thing, but it
Mm-hmm.
was drop shipping. Or I also had a mentor helping me kind of trade stocks back then too, more so options. And I was trading off of, it was E-Trade, and I was trading Scott Trade off of my phone while driving. I had the Tri-County area of South Florida, so Palm Beach, Broward, and then Miami-Dade. So I'm driving on 95 in traffic, and I'm trying to trade options from my phone, on there. This was before Robinhood and stuff. But then I realized that myself in 2017, you can try all these things and be mediocre at it, or you can go all in on one thing and become really good at it. And like anyone else, I read the Dad Rich book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and a couple other things, and then I realized 90% of millionaires are made in real estate, and that's tried and true. And I said, this wholesaling thing's got to work. So I, in my 9 to 5 sales job, I had that, and then I started driving Uber and Lyft at nights in Miami so I can build up marketing dollars for wholesaling. Because at the time, SMS wasn't as big as it is now, and some other things. And at the time back then, it was sending out the postcards and the letters. And those things were not as cheap as they are now. They were, I think, $1 a piece back then. I think I was doing yellow letters versus postcards because it was a little more. It was, everyone was doing postcards, and another thing too, I started to do. Everyone was doing single family houses. I was doing duplexes, triplexes, and 4 units. So I was doing multifamily but residential. Um,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Gotcha.
so
That's
I
actually where
picked
I
out a
got my
little
start
niche.
when I was a broker. I started in the duplexes, and I ended up choosing to scale larger. But
Yeah, good
I,
shit.
I've been there, and that's a first step for a lot of people. You're like, wait, I'm only competing on if everyone's going one way,
Right.
you go over a couple lanes, and you're like, hey, there's an opportunity here. So and I think you were a little ahead of the curve there. That was right around the time bigger pockets started going like, wait a second,
Yep.
all of our single family stuff works for multi.
Yeah,
So you're
exactly.
just ahead of the curve.
Yeah, exactly. And it worked out kind of well too because, and the reason why it worked is because, you run comps on single families, and you can run comps, and then nobody really, like you said, bigger pockets started coming out, and nobody really knew how to, at least in the wholesaling space, right? How to run like cap rates and stuff like that. And if you found out and figured out how to run a cap rate and stuff off of a duplex and a triplex, the people that were buying them, the investors, they know, right? They're looking for a cap rate, but the guys that were like me and just trying to start out and just trying to start wholesaling, they didn't understand it. So they didn't know how to do it. So back then I was able to find duplexes and triplexes and, base it off of a cap rate. And, back then I was selling a 12% cap rate, on a duplex or a triplex to an investor in, Miami or, Broward or, South Florida. And that was really good. I think now it's funny. You look forward. I think now they're selling out like 4 and 5% cap rates in South Florida there. So,
Hmm.
it's funny as, other countries, fail and people get their money out of the countries, they're overpaying and they're overpaying in South Florida because they don't care. So it's a lot of reasons, and that's a whole nother thing. But it made it a little easier for me at the time to offload a duplex and market to the duplex because they weren't, or the triplex, because they weren't getting as many marketing letters as the single family, owners were getting. Hey, I want to buy your house. And so it created a little niche. And but I do want to make note on that because it's super important. In 2015, I spent $10,000 on a guru who showed a course and showed flashy stuff. And I'm like, man, this is great. I'll never forget, even had on the video Josh Altman from Million Dollar Listing, which everyone kind of knows now. Back then, it was still a newer show, on it with him. He wasn't in the course and everything, but he was on the initial video to get you to come in and buy it. I failed at that because it focused on all the wrong things. You spent too much money on the course, and then you didn't have any money for marketing. The second time when I succeeded, I went ahead and, I drove for Uber, from maybe 7 to midnight, 1 a.m., saving marketing dollars to send out 3 or 5,000 mailers. And it's funny, driving on 95 in South Florida. If I got a call from a mailer, I was pulling over, I was taking notes on a yellow pad. For sure you're answering that phone call. And but I was able to do that because I saved up and I hired another mentor. This one I call a mentor versus a guru. Just happened to find him at a real estate investor association's meetup, and that person was more hands-on, and they were actually doing it, kind of like you and I do, versus showing the flashy stuff. And that person I learned from. Ultimately, fast forward, that person became my partner because I started doing so many deals, and it just made sense overall. But from there, 17, started flipping, doing wholesales and whatnot. And then Miami got a bit oversaturated as far as that. So then I started to hop from there, like 2019 or so. I started to do it virtually, and
Hmm.
virtually started to become a big thing. Again, I think I was a little bit ahead of that curve, um, because people were only doing it in markets that they were in. But I started doing it in Houston, Texas, wholesaling. And then, shortly after Houston blew up, and I started doing it a bit in Memphis because I heard you can buy houses for, there was these cheap houses in Memphis. I ultimately stopped in Memphis because I learned it was very block by block. But yeah. And then, a couple years later, I started buying rentals and partnered with someone that I came across that lived in Memphis, and, then started investing and buying rentals, and stumbled upon a Section 8 rental I bought in a portfolio. And fast forward, before you know it, we own over 200 units together, and the majority of them are Section 8 housing.
So Section 8 is something that I've settled on as a huge piece of my portfolio. And I've, over the years, specifically because of the Section 8 rental standards, I buy a lot of rentals that are specifically, I do the math on if I could get this to Section 8's FMR, we
Hmm.
make a lot of money. And so I'll actually base my just market rate rentals off of deals where I'm like, if I buy this and this has a good chance of getting at or above FMR, I can offer this
Yeah.
to people in need and the general market. It helps me set my pricing. I hit my pricing, and we've made, millions and millions and millions of dollars doing this over the last few years. Section 8 and understanding how to use these is huge. Now, I
Yeah.
have had a tendency on social media to rip into people doing single family in the Midwest for Section 8. You're buying in Memphis, single family, Section 8. I like a lot of the way that you operate, and it is different than a lot of people. The people that I rip on primarily are the guys that you see online, and you've already talked about them. They're the ones who are standing in front of the boat, the yacht, the supercar, the mega house, going like,
Yeah.
I buy hundreds of these with no effort at all. And I'm like, okay, so then why do you have 17 cars? You
Right.
only buy that crap if you have active income to write off, right?
Right.
You don't need 7 or 8 Bentleys and a yacht. If you're buying real estate, typically what you do when you get a bunch of money is you buy a decently nice house,
Hmm.
You have maybe one nice car, maybe. I have a Tesla Model Y for my wife and I. I don't even have two cars. And then you go out and you buy more real estate when you have more money. That's what a
Yeah,
normal real estate investor does. If you love real estate, you usually buy more real estate. That's usually where your money goes.
you're
So
right.
with someone like you, who is an operator, what does it look like to do single family Section 8? How do you set your rental standards? And how do you balance you're renting to Section 8 tenants, but you want to provide a quality rental in your community? Like you want to be a positive influence on your community and you want to make money. And you have a tenant base that, some of these people have credit scores that are unbelievable. Like
Yeah.
I just saw the last one I saw that we declined. But I think their credit score is like 460. I'm like, how do you do that? That's hard to do. It's
That is,
almost
yeah.
you almost have to make an effort not to pay things.
Yeah. You absolutely do. Yeah. I mean, so it's different in different markets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny. It's funny you say that because the first Section 8 property that we bought a portfolio. So we bought 16 townhouses in a community of like 66 townhouses, and now we own like the majority of that community. And then we came across one. There was one in there that was a Section 8 tenant. We didn't know it, and really till after we closed ultimately, and we're like, man. And then I saw it. I was like, man, a Section 8 tenant, like I knew there was paperwork that had to go along with it, and I'm like, Jesus, like, ugh. And then they were a bit under market rent in comparison. The rent was low for the retail ones that we had in there, but they were still under market rent. And it was funny enough, like I went and visited a friend in Miami shortly after we closed on it, and we went out on his boat, and then we hung out. We came back at like midnight, and we were hanging out on Biscayne Boulevard. If you know Miami, it's like the main strip, and we were at a food
Mm-hmm.
truck in a parking lot just chilling. And Miami doesn't sleep, so midnight, we're having a bite, hanging out, talking, and it's funny because I look across the street, and I'll never forget. There was a Taco Bell and a
Mm-hmm.
Wendy's there, and they had up a sign, and the sign says now hiring $15 an hour, and we were talking about whatever, and and he's Cuban, so he's very loud and boisterous, and I love that. I wish I had that type of energy. But I said, isn't it funny that these places can't find anybody for $15 an hour? This was a few years ago. And he's like, bro, why? And I'm like, no, why? And he's like, because people that typically work there, they would be making too much money at $15 an hour, and they would lose all of their government benefits. I was like, wow, that's interesting.
Yes.
And yeah, and he owned a couple rentals in Miami himself. And then we got to talking, and I was like, what do you mean by that? Well, he's like, generally, they get XYZ benefits. They get, food stamps, they get their power bill paid for, they get government assistance, Section 8. I was like, I was like, it's funny. I just bought a property that's Section 8 tenant. And, and he's like, yeah, he's like, if I wish I, can go back years ago, I wish I would have rented to Section 8. And then, so he began to educate me a bit on it. And then I went back and, to Memphis, and I told my business partner, and I said, I think this is something more we have to look into. And I said, and here's the pros of it. Yeah, it's got some cons on it and whatnot, and we can talk about that. But ultimately, um, at that point, I was like, I think we're on to something big here. And then so I dug into that one rental, and that
Mm-hmm.
market rent. So touching on your market rent, fair FMR, which is fair market rent for people who listen who doesn't realize, and fair market rent is set forth by HUD, which is the government. They're over all Section 8. It's they set the fair market rent for every zip code in every city across the country of what they would pay typically for a Section 8 housing, what they pay us, and it's different all over. So I went back and I said the fair market rent for this property, it was rented at 650 at the time, was 950. I filled out one form. I found the one
Mm-hmm.
form, and by one form filled it out. I sent it in, and boom, I got approved. I just upped that person's rent from 650 to 950, $300 extra a month, $3,600 extra a year for that one unit. Now, most people realize you can't do this. So the owner prior never raised that person's rent since they were lived in there. I think it was like 7 years. They kept it the same. And I said, holy shit, James, that was really easy. And then so from there, I dug in and we bought another one and I figured out the program and then started rented to them. And so the reason why we do single families versus uh, complexes or multifamilies or whatever, because it's different in different areas. We learned that Memphis is a bit more like the wild, wild west in comparison to a lot of different cities. So like it's a big city, and
Mhm.
with big cities, and I think Memphis, I mean, I heard this stat, I don't know how true it is, but I can see it being true, is like, 34 or 35 years running, it's like it's like number one in cities across the country as far as bankruptcies, right? So I can see that. And when you have that, you're going to have super low credit scores. And like you said, we get some credit scores in and we're like, holy shit, like you literally have to put in effort to get a credit score this low.
Mm.
Like you have to try.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like how do you even do this? I didn't know it goes that low, right? Um, but in comparison, we have students elsewhere that are in smaller submarkets and they have Section 8 tenants that have credit scores, some are better than mine. And so I think, again, that varies. So when it looks to like credit scores and different stuff like that, and how you qualify the tenant, I think we look at a bigger picture versus just denying off of a credit score
Hmm.
ultimately. But yeah, if you can come in and then, get that fair market rent, and it always increases every year as long as we've been doing it. And even if you have one unit that you're just raising at $25, you know, and we have units we raise $25, we raise $300 or $400 depending on where they're at, if they're in there when we bought it. You're getting anywhere from $1,000 extra a year per unit to a few thousand extra per year, per unit. And that's just a big upside of doing it. And if you're doing it the way you're doing it, you can come in, buy our portfolio, raise the rent, and sell it off of a cap rate. And forced equity, right, is what it's called, and make a boatload of money doing that too.
Now, one of the reasons, arguing the other direction, this is what I found in commercial. Commercial, the one advantage you have, this is 5 units and above, is that your valuation is based primarily off of your performance on the property. So if you find a deal like that, and let's say you over the course of the year you do say you buy 425 plexes,
Hmm.
and you find all of them have an opportunity like this. I just bought a 25 plex where rents were at 550, FMR was at 850. Signed a paper, instantly $300 per unit extra revenue. Let's just do it on 125 plex. So you go 25 units times $300, $7,500 a month in cash flow. That's
Incredible.
awesome.
Yeah, that's incredible. Where else can you do it? And the regular retail, typically, correct me if I'm wrong, typically a regular retail tenant rent each year, a typical increase is like 3%.
Yeah. Three to, depending on where you're at in the country,
Right.
anywhere from 2 to 5%, market dependent, is
Right.
typically what you're looking at. With three being the national average, it sits right around three. I think last time I looked at it, it was like 3.1 is the average increase.
Exactly. One thing I want to touch on though, the point that I was making as far as then we started to buy single families is
Mm-hmm.
because we did buy a sixplex after that. We did buy a fourplex, and then we have an 11 unit, which is actually right next to a hospital, and we're still
Oh,
developing
nice.
that. Yeah, we struck on that one. We're still developing that, but we're not gonna put Section 8 tenants in that one because we learned that, but by our 4 unit and the 6 unit, and then that townhouse community that we had, we learned the hard way, just like anyone else. You go through it, right? Operator, through trials and tribulations, that if you have one Section 8 tenant that has an issue, if you put them in, let's just say a 4 unit, now you might have two Section 8 tenants that have an issue. So if you have one problem, that one problem leads to other problems because let's face it, the majority of them don't work. So what are they doing all day? They're hanging out, their friends are coming over, whatever. Now it's different by different markets, right? Again, the markets that you invest in, you can get away with the multifamilies. Here in Memphis, we can't. So we learn real quick, and then from there, all we do is buy single family houses. Because if you have one problem, if it's domestic violence or whatever the case may be, you got one problem. It's not messing it up. Because at the end of the day, Section 8 tenants are just regular people like you and I, and the
Hmm.
majority of them are they're doing good, they want to do good, and they have kids, and they don't want to raise their kids around maybe someone else, that has problems or domestic violence issues or things like that. So, we stop that real quick. That way, if there's one problem, it's one, and it doesn't lead into multiple problems. But again,
And
it's different in
I think
different
you
markets.
touched on something really important. As you get into larger cities, and I've invested in Seattle, and I've invested in Central Washington, I've invested in the Dallas area and in small markets around the Dallas area. The smaller markets traditionally are going to have an easier tenant to do multifamily on. You tend to have these family oriented communities. The culture there matters. If I was doing Section 8 and I was offering this in, say, downtown Houston, it's an area of Texas that is traditionally you have it's like you had mentioned, you have good neighborhoods, bad neighborhoods, you have a lot of different demographics, you have higher crime rates. Your Section 8 population is going to be rougher, and people who have time to sit around all day, especially in port cities,
Yeah.
there tends to be more drugs. We saw this in Seattle consistently. You have a 12-plex in the city of Seattle. I had a 7-plex.
Okay.
The amount of break-ins that we would have, I had to, I could not use the little door locks, the ones that you clip on the door, the
Oh
little
yeah, yeah, yeah.
key
The lock
boxes.
boxes. Yeah.
I couldn't use lock boxes because the second I put a lock box on a door, the homeless would find it, know it's vacant, and break in. They'd go
Oh
unlock.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I would never do Section 8 in Seattle personally because the government doesn't care, the people don't care, the drugs are rampant,
Right.
and it's going to infect your property.
Absolutely.
I found in like small town Texas, and here's the fun math of multifamily. So if you're in like small town Texas, you're in a kid. I invest in Stephenville, Texas. It's a
Okay.
dairy town that has a booming college. So you have a ton of young kids, you have a ton of families, and they're farming community families, traditionally, all American grass fed beef families, and football and rodeo.
Nice.
In a town like that, the math gets fun. You have that 7.5 grand per month that you add instantly through
Hmm.
Section 8. Multiply that by 12, $90,000 a year on one transaction
It's
in a
incredible.
market that trades on a 6 cap. So you divide that by 0.06. That's not bad. See, so we take 90,000 divided by 0.06. I'll run out my calculator here. You make $1.5 million the like within 2 months of buying that property. Now a bank's
Okay.
going to want
Yeah.
you to season it for a year,
Right, right, right.
but next year you made $1.5 million. I did that deal seller financed. I
Wow.
signed a paper, and a year later my net worth goes up $1.5 million. It's hard to do in single family, but to your point, you have to know your market. The opportunity
Right.
in your market, it doesn't matter if you make $1.5 million. If you end up with a building that has two competing gangs in it, drugs, and two of your tenants got murdered.
Right.
Uh,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah,
I've had. I've had tenants get murdered in Washington State. And guess what? It was in one of the buildings that had Section 8. It wasn't a Section 8 tenant, but it was someone who we inherited in a rougher building, in a rougher
yeah.
area, where the rents are lower. And you do have, in a higher crime area, you increase your risk of horrendous things happening,
Yep.
and it infects your property. One gang member moves in, now all of his buddies move in. Now you have tenants who are getting harassed or trapped in there. Like, it can scale out of control.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing in
Quickly.
Memphis, Tennessee. You're isolating yourself based on what your market's doing. You're saying, hey, we're going to take the biggest problem tends
Yeah.
to be the people here.
Hmm.
So let's spread out the problem, reduce risk. We have less variables, and we can
Right.
control one property at a time. That
Versus
is a business
exactly.
model that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Versus exactly like condensing that all into one area, right? Or obviously multiple at this point, but like, all in one, it's spread out throughout. And you sprinkle it into, good areas that generally you can find
Mm-hmm.
good deals, that there's good retail, there's homeowners that live in there versus versus renters, and then you generally don't have problems. Like you just don't. Now, can you do what you're doing as far as it's one purchase, you just forced your equity, and then all of a sudden, you're making that million and a half, in your net? No, but we just do it on scale with
Yep.
properties, right? So, we probably make five, seven, you know, probably 5 to 10 offers a day, on properties here. And, we're buying five to, maybe seven of them a month. And we just do it on scale. And the reason why, so our model's a little different than yours, because the
It
reason why
is.
we stick here in Memphis, we've had outlier areas, right? We've had Louisville and we just got rid of it. And we had Far East Tennessee. That one wasn't Section 8, but we had uh, Mississippi. No, not Mississippi. The hell's the other city down there? I'll think in a minute. But we realized that let's just do the market that we're in. We have, our home ship, right? Our office is here. We have all the connections here. We built out this whole thing here as far as banks, appraisers, like everything that's unique is because,
Yes.
don't forget, like appraisers, like, they're a dime a dozen like real estate agents. So when you find a good appraiser and then you find a good bank, and the bank will use that appraiser or appraisers, right? You can create your own round table of appraisers, and that way they're always being used, right? Because you can have an appraiser that doesn't know what they're doing, just like a real estate agent, and come in and kill your deal. So we're like, let's just stick to this market, just scale it here, and that's kind of what we did, ultimately, and provide, and like at the end of the day, it's funny because we get a lot of things online. I'm sure you do too, like social media. Oh, slumlord and this and that, and I actually take pride in not being
So
slumlord.
do I.
Yeah, I mean, just like your properties, like these tenants, like I mean. They're going into now. We're not into them for like 200,000, right? But they're going into $200,000 properties, right? Um, Something they would never be able to buy, you know, and so they're getting a really great quality house. Not all of them are 200,000, but at the end of the day, they're getting a good quality house. We make it, maintenance free or as maintenance free as possible at the end of the day. But I mean, tile and, not bad carpet, right? We really don't do carpet, but like tile and just different things that, that they wouldn't otherwise have. So like when people say, oh, on Slumlord, call you Slumlord and stuff online or in person or whatever, or they make joke when they say I'll meet someone out somewhere and they'll ask what you do, and you know basically do rentals, and then they'll ask a little bit more, what kind of rentals, or what, Airbnb? No, not really. I've done that thing. Rent to Section 8 tenants. Oh, so you're a slumlord, huh? No, not quite, jerk off. You know what I mean? And because there are slumlords out there, but
Yes.
they're the thing with Section 8 is you actually do have to keep your property up in pretty good standards because you have to pass that inspection, right? I mean,
Yes. Every time you place a tenant, every year, every renewal, you have to be able to pass the inspection. And beyond that, you make more money if you don't have vacancy. Like, I don't want turnover. Even with Section
right.
8, their voucher can get them into a better property. They're gone.
Yeah, exactly.
It,
Absolutely.
it's an open market,
They
and
have options.
vacancy is ludicrously expensive. On top of that, and this is what I love about the business model. This is the last thing I'll say on Section 8, but if you do this right, you can provide above market spaces at slightly below market prices to where your tenants, regardless of their income, can qualify to live there. So you're
Yep.
giving them a better place than they can afford to live, notably better. You give quality housing. You do your best to stack the deck for quality people.
Yep.
You really get to do a good thing for your community. And I think if you're not getting any hate for this online, you're not trying hard enough. If you have scale and you get resistance, that is a biggest compliment when people are like, "Oh, slumlords," because you're providing housing. I'm like, well, what do? We eliminate bed bugs. We remediate mold. We provide quality housing. We provide it with subsidies. We end homelessness.
Yeah.
I'm like, good. These are all people that we're not competing with. Then
Right. Yeah,
you're not going to clean up your
exactly.
town. We'll do it for you, and we'll
Right,
make a bunch of
exactly.
money doing it. But we get to feel good. Like, I get to go to bed at
Yeah.
night being like, wow, we actually made this little corner of town better. There's two things that you said that I want to make sure no one missed. One, hyper locality. When you can use the same teams, the same banks, the same contractors, the same, you save so much
Oh my
freaking
God.
money.
Yeah.
Every
I,
time you
I
do a
totally
new market, it's essentially, effectively, it's a new business. You are
yeah,
starting a brand new business.
from
It's not that you
scratch.
can't do that,
Yes.
but I invest 99% of my money is invested in Moses Lake, Washington, Grant County, Washington, Mason County, Washington, Erath County, Texas. I have 3 markets. They run like 3 businesses.
Yep.
I buy enough rentals in each of those areas next to each other where I can directly influence market rent, which again, based on our math earlier, makes me a lot of money when I can influence rent.
Absolutely.
There's so many ways to make money. The people who go, hey, I'm going to invest all over the country, I'm just going to look at every deal.
The
One
shiny
of the
object
biggest mistakes
syndrome.
people make. It very, very, very expensive. Don't make that mistake. Another thing that I want to make sure that we hit before we end on. You went through one thing in this where you said I went from one job to another job to another job. I tried wholesaling. I've tried flipping. I've tried like a lot of people.
Yep.
You've a lot of flavors to get to where you're at today. Along the journey, the most expensive time you start anything, and this ties right into opening a new market. You know the least when you're starting. You make the most expensive mistakes. Like it just costs more when you're newer because you don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
In your journey, what is the most expensive stupid tax been? Where it's like, wow, I didn't know this, and it could be emotional, it could be monetary. Doesn't really matter. I've had both. But for your business, what do you think the most expensive stupid tax has been?
I guess the biggest cost, and like you really hit the nail on the head. People don't realize. I just want to touch on that too because it sounds cool. It sounds really cool. Wow, you own properties all across the country? Yeah, I own a property in Las Vegas, and I own some in North Carolina, and I own one in Miami. And wow, that's awesome. And then people starting out, they want to try and do that, but it's stupid, honestly, especially if you're doing one. If you're doing something like you're doing it, it's going to make a little bit more sense because ultimately, if you're buying 60 doors or whatever, a complex, that's essentially a business in itself. So it makes a little bit more sense to do that. But if you're doing a one-off or whatever, or just small units in this, it like, don't do that, if anyone's listening to this, because every time you're literally starting out fresh. And here's the you asked the costs on things, like, you are starting out new in business. So the biggest thing is, when you're doing this, is your contractors. You're going to get hit over the head because you don't know who's good, who's bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
We bought one in Cincinnati, well, just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yeah.
And it was through an email. I got a cold email from someone. It was like very first, like my first wholesale deal. My first wholesale deal, I couldn't tell you what the guy looked like. It was through a text message. The deal was done through text. I closed it through text, and I never met the guy, never heard from him. And this one we bought, it was Cincinnati, Ohio. I got an email, bought the property, had a retail tenant in it for a couple of years. That tenant then moved out, and we're like, we're going to go up there and just take a look at it, and maybe we'll start buying in this area. And then we went up there just to, we had nothing better to do and thought it'd be fun and cool. And we went up there, and we were going to get this thing Section 8 ready ourselves. And then we're a day into it. And we're like, shit, screw this. So then we set up like 14 contractors to come through the next day to give us bids. And, when you do that, 5 of them show up, and then, 3 are outrageously priced. And then the other 2 might be okay, but, you're going to run into, are they going to show up for the job? Then you have to give them too much of a draw. So one of the biggest things is, so then ultimately with that property, we said, screw this. We got it ready to go on the market. I found a really
Yeah.
good realtor. We sold it, and that's when we started selling stuff, and then zoned it in on Memphis. And again, here's the reason why, is because we built everything here. So when you go to the new markets, the biggest thing that we found is, necessarily one of the biggest things, is starting your new business. So what's the cost of that when you are doing when you're buying rentals? Yeah, okay, they might be rent ready. I don't care what any guru. There's this one. There's one, and I'm not going to mention any names on here, that does Section 8 out there. And like he swears up and down to his students and people on social media, I buy these properties and you don't need to do squadouche to them and then move somebody in. I'm going to tell you right now, that's bullshit. Like, and as well as I do, like, I don't care how good the property looks in a picture. You're going to need to do a little something to it if you're doing Section 8 ultimately, because there's going to be something that fails in inspection.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the biggest thing is contractors, finding a good, contractor. That can be your biggest expense. You go into a new market, you might, one of my students had this happen. They got a referral on a contractor. They gave the contractor too much draw up front, and the contractor went ghost on them. So I think ultimately your contractors are going to, maintenance man or handyman or however you want to, word it, or that person's going to be, is going to be like your bread and butter. They're going to be your eyes and ears. So like finding a good one of that, again, referrals is a good one, but then also kind of, diving through referrals and just kind of vetting them out, and then just kind of handling them. If they're asking for like half of the price up front of their bid to start it, that's like a red flag, and too much time, newbies don't necessarily know any different, and they give them that, and then that person's gone and they're on to the next person to do that. And we've lost a lot of money, not necessarily making that exact mistake, but with bad contractors. Ultimately, I think that's probably number one. What about you?
My highest stupid tax was, I think this touches on kind of that market to market thing. Jumping out of the core business, I bought a resort, seller finance, made a ton of money. Foothills of the Olympic Mountains on the water. I talk about this on a lot of pods.
Nice.
Beautiful cabins with hot tubs in the woods. Creek runs through it. 12 and a half acres. I mean, the thing's one of a kind. Beautiful resort. And it makes money. And we bought it for a good price. I think we bought it for about what it was worth, but seller financed, great deal. Problem is, huge distraction from my core business. I'm a value add multifamily guy. And so what happened is my PM company took off. Multifamily strategy, over 2,000 students, takes a ton of time because I will always coach it. I'm always the coach. And I'm in the field, I'm doing the thing. So I do the things, I coach, just like you.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to compromise on those, which means I have a lot of time between the podcast, the YouTube channel, the Instagram, the teaching, the coaching, the buying, the operating, the PM company. I don't have time to run a resort that has 8
Yeah.
employees,
Which is a
that
lot
has its
different.
own tax filings every month, that has its own business. I have to learn Airbnb, short-term rentals. It's not my business. It made money. It makes money. And it is the biggest distraction from my core business. Had I not bought that, I absolutely believe this. I'd have twice as much multifamily today if I didn't have to spend all the time figuring out how to run that resort.
And that's really important to that's really important that you said that, because that touches back to like when I got started. There was
Mm-hmm.
three things, right? Drop shipping, let's trade stocks, or let's do real estate. And you can do all of them, but you're never really going to be good, right? So jump one in on one and get really good and let it be that thing and run with it. And versus like a shiny object syndrome, you're like, just because you can buy a resort, like, should you buy a resort? It sounds cool and everything, right? But you kind of got away from your core strategy, and it kind of bogged you down. And I think that's exactly it. Too, that's a big one. Because while Airbnb, and a lot of people listening, right? Airbnb, everyone's selling me on Airbnb. It sounds cool, and then you're doing this, and maybe you have two rentals and you're doing your strategy, or you're doing a strategy similar to me, but then you try to do Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
If you just double down on one thing and then go all in on it and just become really fucking good, like, you can make a lot of, if it works, you can make a lot of money. And don't let it's like tunnel vision, right? Don't let
Yep.
anything else distract you outside of there. I think that's a really good lesson.
What came out of it for me is something that I ask myself on every single opportunity, every business, because all the businesses need to interlock. I'm open to starting a new business, but it needs to enhance my current business. I bought a sales and marketing company a while ago. It made sense because I already had systems that I needed this stuff for. It
Hmm.
plugs into multifamily strategy. It plugs into direct plugins to your core business can make sense. But I always tell myself every time, just because it makes money doesn't mean it makes sense. There's lots of ways to make money. There's tons of ways to make money.
That's really
I
good.
don't I don't mass market. So for me, I write about 12 offers a year. Your strategy makes sense, but I don't write 12 offers a day. That's not I'll do in a day what you do, or I'll do in a year what you do in a day. totally different strategies. It would
Mhm.
be stupid for me to do your strategy, and it'd be stupid for you to do my strategy.
Right.
You're good at your system. You have something that works.
Exactly.
It's become easy for you because now, why would you jump out of your lane when you don't have to? So,
Right.
if you're
Exactly.
thinking on a business adventure, this is for any listener. Just because it makes money doesn't mean it makes sense. Make sure that it
Yeah, I
makes
think that's really
sense.
good. Yeah, just because it
And,
makes money doesn't mean it makes sense, and that's what people ask. Like, how long you've been doing this forever, right? No, not necessarily. As far as buying it, like, how did you get to over 200, doors ultimately? And they're single family houses, right? So it's 200 houses,
mhm.
over that. Just like
That's
you just
so
get
many
really good at it.
transactions. That's insane.
Yeah,
By the way,
it is. But
insane accomplishment.
once you create it, it's literally like a conveyor belt, right? And
Hmm.
you just keep feeding the machine, and it has all these different, like you said, transactions, right? So like, am I writing offers? No, I have a realtor that's doing it for me. I text him. I say, hey, or my business partner, I text them, make an offer on X, Y, Z for this price and they go back and forth, right? But then it goes into a CRM, and then we have follow ups on that, so they're not forgetting to do their job, and then title, and then all of that stuff. But renting it, then refinancing it 6 months down the line or whatever the case may be, and then rinse and repeat. And once you build out your strategy, man, you just feed that machine and you can really run. That's how it's easy to go from, if you're going to do my strategy or yours, or for anybody listening, the hardest part is just figuring out your strategy and then building that out. And once you do, you can literally scale. You hear about, I'll never forget, like, it's a goal of mine, obviously, but there's a guy who's been around for, uh, very long time here in Memphis. He owns a title company. He owns a bunch of other stuff. I think he's an attorney. He closed one of our deals a couple of years ago, and I remember going into the office when we didn't have a set title company at the time. Now we have like a set team inside of a title company. Like everything, gets done. And I remember going in there and sat down and signed some closing docs and just asked him. And he had over 2,000 rentals here in Memphis. Like, I'm like, my God, and they're all single family houses. Like, Jesus, like 2,000 rentals. Well, he just figured out a system that worked really well with him, and he's old school too, right? So like, and before I started doing it, my business partner James, he had a bunch of rentals on his own as well, and similar with this guy, and they're just a bit old school. Like, they were going around to door. They had runners going to pick up, cash or money orders, and just and this guy had runners on the inside loop of Memphis, the outside loop of Memphis. But the point of that is he built a system that worked for him, that allowed him to get to over 2,000 rentals. And I remember him telling me that, like, he owned all of them outright. Like, so I mean, man, you just do the math on something like that and it's just insane. But he found what works and he built it and he stuck to it. And then that can lead to other avenues down the line if you want to, that plug in, right? So then now he owns a title company and some other stuff. But like you said, they all kind of plug into what he's already doing, and it makes sense to do those businesses.
And it absolutely does. And if someone wants to learn your model from you, they really resonate with like, hey, I think single family makes sense for my market. I want to build my own system. How would someone find you online, connect with you to learn from you and your program?
Yeah, so honestly, like, there's so many people out there that put out different stuff, like buy my course, and we were so against this for the longest time, do a course. But then we had people started to come to us, especially in Memphis, that kind of knew us and like, teach us what you do. And the first set of students that we had, one of the first, there was three guys, and they had two doors for like a year. And they came into the office. We went through some stuff, and they went from two doors within 1 year to 42 doors. Literally a year later. It's really awesome to see, and that kind of gave us a lot of fulfillment as well. James and I, helping others out. Some are like, shit, we're going to put together, let's put together something and kind of make it real, but do it different than like other people do. And so we bought some other courses out there just to see what others like are offering and stuff. And ours is, again, a bit different. We're not super pushy on it. If you go to a lot of these other people, that's all they're trying to push you, and you see ads
Hmm.
left and right. We're not, but we have it for instances like this. So if anyone wants to, literally, you can just go to my Instagram or find me on social media, Real Estate Ant on Instagram. It's _Real Estate Ant, and on my profile page, there's a link. And, I think right now, I don't even know what the price is, but ultimately, we give you everything that we have, all the documents. We bought one course, and this guy, again, it saddens me, but bought his course, and literally the lease that he's given in the course is one that you can get off of legal templates. Actually, most of the documents that he got that you get in this course, and he's charging a pretty penny for it, you can get off of legal templates. So that pissed me off too. Like, we spent $20,000-$30,000 on our lease. We constantly update our lease. Like right now, we're doing an in-office meeting with our team this week, and we're updating a lot of stuff. So like that new lease that we're different lines and stuff that we're updating, our attorneys update, we put that in the course, we update it, so you get everything that we have. And I don't know necessarily when you come across this, but as of now, and for the foreseeable future, we also have you come out, expenses are on you. But the cool part is, you actually, once you complete the course, aside from doing live, we hop on lives with our students once or twice a month, open Q&A. It's not just some pre-recorded shit. Here's how to do seller finance and hope you understand it, right? You can actually come to Memphis, and for 5 hours, you meet at our office. We start here. We'll go over some stuff. We'll go over your goals, things like that. And then literally we drive to properties, and you might be in 10, 15, 20 properties. And we just go and show you the field and show you what it's like. And, what we do maintenance wise, what we don't do. You might walk through some that are tenant occupied and, see some good tenants, some bad tenants, whatever the case may be. And that's ultimately how I really started to learn. When I started to do wholesaling, I needed someone that was more hands-on versus just a video. Here's how you do it. Thanks. I'll never see you again. And, so that's what we offer. And that's kind of what makes us stand out. Because I told James, listen, we're not obviously doing this for the money. Obviously there's a course to it, because if you just put stuff out there for free or super inexpensive, people don't take it seriously. But if they pay for it, right, you got to have some skin in the game. It goes to that. Ultimately that, you're going to kind of take some action on it, or at least hopefully. So, we put something out there that's worthy, that you actually learn and are able to, aside, you get Discord access to us where you can text and ask all that questions, and other students as well. But like I said, we're on all social medias, Real Estate Ant, Instagram, Real Estate Ant _ in the beginning. And I'd love to see you and help you out on there.
Dude, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. If you guys haven't had a chance yet, you've already made it all the way through the podcast. It's been 50 minutes. Like, subscribe, share with a friend, drop a rating on the show. We appreciate it massively. This helps us get this owner meeting out to more people. And ultimately, that's what I built my whole portfolio on, was meeting other owners who've done something that I want to do. So if you resonate with this, reach out to Anthony. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, you want more of this, you want me to meet more owners for you, go ahead and like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.